Hello, my name is Ari. You may have seen my impeller kit videos, parts 1 through 6, as well as a couple other reviews on YouTube. But I have another issue or situation that I wish to bring to your attention. And it's in regards to a local cable company that provides internet and TV and so forth, called RCN. And why I think this company has proven that they're just horrible in terms of their service. Liars and incompetent, or just not concerned about the service they provide and the claims that are made in regards to what truly happened. And let me just start by mentioning that the situation that has occurred recently, and as of November, this is a repeat of a prior situation. So let me go back to the original time that this happened, and it was I didn't remember the exact date, but I found out from one of the representatives when I called again about this repeated reoccurring problem, that it was in 2014, and I think it was April. And I don't remember the exact date, so they reminded me, but I remember all the details very clearly. As I'm a technical person, I'm actually an electrical and general contractor, and I work with cable TV. I used to install DirecTV. I work with cable TV wires, and I work with audio, video, and all of that. So anyway, this goes back to the situation 2 years ago when all of a sudden I was home. It was in the morning, maybe 9 o'clock or so. I slept in late. I forget what day of the week it was, but I do know I got up and I discovered that my internet service was not working. So I went through the trouble of the usual possible causes, rebooting the modem, checking my connection, so forth. Went through all this trouble, and then I finally called my cable internet provider, RCN. And I was on the phone, and they were looking into it and checking things, and it's not as if they knew off the bat originally what happened. And then finally they indicated to me that apparently my connection was somehow causing interference in the neighborhood and was causing other people to lose their connection or interfere with their service, so that a technician had come out and had shut me off. Now, they didn't notify me of this. They didn't call me. They didn't alert me that this was a problem, that they were cutting me off. They just shut off my service. And it turns out this technician came out that morning, and I was home when he came out. So he didn't ring the doorbell. If he just knocked, that's one thing. I may not have heard it, but I think I was still getting up in the morning, and my two dogs stay in the bedroom with me, which is near the front of the house. So the dogs go crazy when the doorbell makes noise, and usually also when someone knocks on the door. So and the other thing is, and I'll bring this up in regarding a later claim, is that I have a sign at the front of my door, and if you see, it very clearly says towards the top, "Please ring doorbell," with an arrow pointing to the right where the doorbell is, over here. And there's the sign. So anyway, they never alerted me, never contacted me, so I arranged for a service call and had someone come out. I don't remember if it was that day or the next day or whatever it was, but a person came out and they checked things, and I actually watched as the person that time cut the end off the cable that they have outside at a grounding block before it comes into the house. Actually cut the end of the cable off and put a new end on the cable, and that solved the problem. So I actually watched the guy repairing this outside, and that was the problem, and that the connector got rusty, and water got into the tip of the RG cable, which I'll show you in a little bit. Anyway, that was 2 years ago. So all of a sudden I discover a week or so, in November, it was a Thursday evening, it was about 6 o'clock. Again, I was home, my dogs were here, we were in and out of the backyard and to the front, and what's amazing is from the backyard and the driveway area in front of the garage, I can see down the driveway, and I can usually see where the pole is and where the cable line comes across. So somehow I come inside roughly after 6 o'clock, and internet's out. So I go through the whole same rigmarole, I get on the phone, I finally get told the same thing. There is noise with my connection causing interference, so they cut me off. So at this point I knew exactly it was the same problem. It was obviously outside with the connection. And when I got on the phone with them, it was sort of the end of the business day, so they were making it sound like maybe they could get someone to come out right then and there that evening. And I was on the phone for a couple hours back and forth, someone was going to come out, and then finally they indicated to me that that wasn't going to work, they had to come another day. So they indicated to me they could come out the next day, which was Friday, during the day. I said, well, I won't be home. He said, well, you have to be there. And I started getting a little irritated, and I started explaining to them that this same problem happened a few years ago, whenever it was. I knew it was outside, that they should just come out anyway. And my other point is the fact that when they showed up at 6 o'clock, just like the time 2 years ago, I was home. They never bothered to ring the doorbell. They never bothered to call me. They could have gotten a hold of me as I was home to begin with, if they had even tried calling me or even ringing the doorbell, and they didn't bother to. Not only that, when they came out and disconnected me both times, a few years ago, and this current time, they could have checked outside to try to address the problem right then and there when they were disconnecting me, if it was an outside problem, and they didn't even bother to do that. They just tried to ring my bell, couldn't get me. Well, they didn't ring my bell, they claim knocked, and I'll show you that later, but they basically didn't get a hold of me, didn't try to do anything to fix it. They just disconnected me and left. So I indicated to the person again on this phone call this evening, Thursday evening, that I know it's most likely an outside problem again. This has happened before. They need to send someone out when I'm home or not. Well, we can't do that. That's not our policy, blah, blah, blah. What do we have to come back? And I said, well, if it's not outside, which I doubt it's not, but if you have to come back again, so you come back again. That should be your problem. I said, you should have addressed this when you came out the first time to shut me off when I was home, and you didn't bother getting in contact with me. You didn't try to call me, and you clearly didn't ring the doorbell. So, they refused. Well, they gave me a sob story. So they mentioned about Saturday. So I said, listen, if you guys don't get here by Friday evening when I get home from work, and if it is outside, if you haven't corrected it, I said, I'm leaving. I'm leaving service, and that's it. End of story. So finally, it turns out, I get home Friday. Service is still out. They didn't bother to come out. I call in, they're talking about an appointment the next day, Saturday. So I got on the phone and I called Verizon Fios and I got an appointment for service that Thursday. So Saturday they come out anyway. Technician arrives. He knocks on my door in the morning and rings the doorbell actually. I'm sorry. I come to the door and he says, I'm here to check your problem. He says, I need to come inside. I said, well, I don't think the problem's inside. I think it's outside. Did you check the connection outside? The guy goes, his name is John, by the way. He says, yeah, I pinged it outside and there was no problem outside, blah, blah, blah. So he's already, I guess, a little annoyed because I claim I know what I'm talking about and he's a technician and I'm claiming I know what the problem is. So he comes in, he reaches behind my cable modem and he grabs a wrench and he nudges the wrench on there, and I can see he turned it only a little bit, maybe, if at all. And he says, no, the problem was there. That was probably the problem. I turned your connector a full turn. It was loose. It was backed off a full turn. Well, first of all, I had actually unscrewed that connection the day before and checked it and screwed it on myself. So it wasn't loose, number one. Number two, I've worked with cable connectors, and I know that if you back off an RG connector a full turn, it's still going to make a connection. Unless you've made the center conductor really short inside, which was not the case and usually isn't the case. The threading on the connector, you're actually turning it a good dozen times, and backing it off one turn is only backing off on the threads maybe like 0.5 millimeter, which is not enough to back the center conductor out to lose connection with the center contact inside the connector, inside the female receptacle. So he gives me that crap story about, that's probably it. So then he walks outside, and at that point, I wasn't dressed, I didn't have my shoes on. So he walks outside, he disappears for a brief period of time. I quickly get my shoes on, and as soon as I try to stick my head out the door, he appears at the front door. Now, he had disappeared. I saw him actually, when I stuck my head out the door, he had been coming around from the side of the house where the cable connection is outside, where that previous problem had occurred. And he said, well, check your service now, see if it's on. So I checked, and sure enough, it came on, and it was working again. And I said, didn't you do something out there? I said, did you fix something outside? He says, no. He says, it was inside where where I tightened the full turn where the cable was loose. And I was like, yeah, right. So we close up or whatever, he calls in, and he leaves. Now, during that time, he never got up in a ladder. There was never a ladder out. He never disconnected anything at a pole. It was all done remotely. Which they can do that. And they can also check. He actually had a phone with him, and he was actually able to check and see what was going on with my cable modem on his smartphone through an app that he uses with him, I guess. So he leaves. I go around the side of the house where the cable connection is, and I look down on the ground and understand my cable connection is there's a gutter that comes down there past where the cables connect, and there's a rain trough, the little diverter at the bottom. And I look down at the diverter, and there's a piece. This is what I picked up. It's a piece of the end of the cable that he cut off because he put a new end on it because it had corroded. And I don't know if you can see in the camera, but if you look in there, you can see how the center conductor has gotten rusty and dirty. And this was a freshly piece of cut cable that he dropped in the ground when he re-terminated it, probably in his haste because I was coming out the door, and he left it there in the ground. And if you look at where he cut it, you can see how there's no rust, there's no anything. If this had been sitting outside, you would see rust because the shielding on RG cable is really steel. Only the center core is copper. So this is a freshly cut piece of cable. It wouldn't have been lying there for, after 2 years. I blow leaves through there. In fact, I just blew leaves through there earlier this fall, so it would have been blown away, it would have been washed away. He dropped this freshly cut piece of cable there. And actually, if you look at, there's an example. I had to put it back in the rain trough, but there's the piece of cable sitting in the rain trough. I put it back down to show, approximately where it was. And this is an idea of where the trough is, and the cable connection, if you can see in the leaves, is right here. That's where there's a cable connection. And this is the cable connection. You can see how there's a nice shiny end here of the line coming in from the street that he re-terminated. And you can see how the loop is actually smaller. He had compressed it because he had cut some of the cable off, and it pulled the loop a little tighter than it was. So he basically flat out lied about the problem being saying that it was inside when it was really outside, and it was the same problem as before. So I filed complaints with the FCC and with the Attorney General, and I stated all those things about finding the piece of cable, that the guy lied, that it was an outside problem, not an inside problem. When I called in, actually, before I filed the complaints, I actually called into RCN and complained to them about the fact that this, service tech lied. And luckily I did that because apparently what they indicated to me was that because he had reported it was an inside problem, then I would have been charged for a service call. So in fact, I would have been fraudulently charged for a service call had I not called in and not had made an issue over this, the fact that he lied, or had I not found the cable. So that's another way I would have been defrauded. And then I filed complaints with the FCC and the Attorney General. I got responses back, letters through them from RCN in response to my complaint and what I said in the complaint. And these complaints are just a repeat and total bogus and nonsense. This is the one from that the Attorney General received from RCN, saying that the internet service issue that was caused by a coaxial cable inside his home was causing interference and blah, blah, blah. We tried to reach the customer so we could resolve the issue, but we're unsuccessful. So they show up my house. They don't ring the doorbell when there's a sign that says clearly marked on the door, please ring doorbell. They didn't even try to contact me by phone. So I don't think they tried very hard. I don't think at all. Quite frankly, the time when it was cut off recently was 6 o'clock or so. So I think the tech came out. It was a long day. It was the end of the day. He didn't want to be bothered. He didn't want to get stuck in a service call. So he stuck a note on my door, which they claim was a big deal, and had me shut off and just left. I think he didn't even want to be bothered. He wanted to show up here so he could say that he showed up for the service call. He gets credit for it. But then he didn't have to do anything, and he didn't have to stay longer fixing the problem. So, and then in the Attorney General complaint, they also say that, they mentioned about that I was without service for 3 days. We issued him a credit for 1 month in the amount of $85, blah, blah, blah. And I had also made a statement about how their connectors I don't think are waterproof, and they said, we're sure we do use waterproof equipment for our lines. Well, why is it that this connection had rusted out in 2014 and again in 2016? So that's their response for the Attorney General. And then the recent one I got, which was their response to the FCC complaint, again in response to the same type of complaint, they say, technician was dispatched, technician knocked. Why did he knock and not ring the doorbell with a clear sign there? No answer and left door tag, blah, blah, blah. Both these cases, again, when the tech showed up, both recently and in the past, why didn't he try to check for connection problems outside, whether or not I was there? He would have found it. He would have found the problem and fixed it right then on the spot. would have saved me aggravation, would have saved the company aggravation and another service call. Because they're just stupid, or they're incompetent, they're lazy, or they just don't run things properly. So the technician disconnected the service from the outside. Well, he never had a ladder here at the beginning or end of his service call, so there was no disconnect from outside. How? I went out and looked at the splitter before he came, and the splitter was still connected. So, and I could have just reconnected it if he had disconnected it. So they do it remotely, so that's bogus. And I actually had one of the reps, one of the head supervisor I was talking with on the phone said, well, if we found the problem outside and we had to confirm whether or not you were working or not, we would need you there to do that. No, because your guys on your smartphones, which you did right in front of me, were able to tell my service is working by looking at a smartphone. So, you know, that's bogus. They gave me that bogus answer. And they didn't disconnect anything outside because he was never up on his ladder. He was never on the pole. I saw him, you know, the few minutes he was here, he never pulled out a ladder. He didn't have the time. Blah, blah, blah. Access was necessary to restore, you know, my service. Well, that's not true because it was outside. So they're still disputing the fact. They think it was, they're trying to say it was still inside when it wasn't. Blah, 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 you know, and then they talk about how they, you know, they gave me a credit like this was a big deal for all my trouble. You know, my hours on the phone, taking off work, fixing a problem that has repeatedly happened, you know, time and time again. And they still don't contact me when they shut me off, and they don't check outside first, and they cause me to have to stay home and waste my time. You know, the hours I spent on the phone with them back and forth, trying to explain to them what was really causing this problem and how they didn't address it properly, which they didn't. And they're just, of course, they're bogus responses. And I wrote another email back to both the Attorney General and the FCC, and I included more pictures which showed the front door and showed, you know, where the cable piece was left, and how they're flat out lying, how their service tech is lying, and now they're lying by saying that it was an inside problem when it wasn't. And I got the piece of cable to prove it. So in my mind, you know, RCN should be fined. They should be punished for this. You know, this is like, this is really fraud when you think about it. If they're going to charge me for a service call, you know, luckily I stopped them, but for service calls because the technician lied and because they got a cable connection issue problem with their installations and they don't address it, and they don't try to contact their customers properly. You know, they could have tried to call me, you know, before disconnecting my service. You know, electricity and water, you know, if they're going to shut off their service, they notify you. You know, they can't just shut it off and just leave you hanging or wondering what's going on. So the cable internet company should be doing the same thing. So tell me what you think. Put some comments in the comment section, whatever. If it was up to me, I mean, RCN, you know, companies continue this kind of behavior and this negligence because there's no consequence to them. You know, it doesn't mean anything to them. They'll give you a month free service sometimes if you complain, but what's a month free service to them? Nothing. I mean, they're providing electronic service. It doesn't really, they're not losing anything. It doesn't cost them anything. So, you know, actually addressing the problem would mean education and training and more stuff which costs them more money, and they're just not going to bother because they don't lose anything. So I think companies should be punished according to, you know, the degree of what they're costing and what would change their behavior. And an example I used, and even when I called RCN, was actually the example of how the toxic waste companies continue to dump in the oceans because our government only charges them $150,000 fines when they do find them dumping. But the fact is, when they're dumping, these companies make millions or hundreds of millions or billions of dollars by dumping. They save. And if the government fines them $150,000, you know, it doesn't stop them from dumping because they make more money by still doing it. So they just pay the fine and they keep dumping. So companies need to be, you know, and like I said, all these companies, your cell phone companies, all these companies, when they cost you hours on the phone and aggravation and downtime and having to stay home to meet with a technician because of their negligence and their incompetence, and they're not handling problems possibly, you know, they should be paying you for your time. They should be, you know, these are things that would make them address these problems and then not have these problems anymore. But they just keep doing it, and that's why our service is so bad. And this is why I suggest don't go with RCN. I wouldn't go with Comcast either. I had one of their, on an installation, I had one of their techs lie and say my modem wouldn't work with the service, that I had to buy a modem from them when I already had modems, which were the same modems that they used anyway. So he's trying to get, I guess, a commission for selling a modem or selling rental of a modem when I already had my own modem. So, you know, I went with Verizon. They're truly fiber optic into the house. And that's it, end of story. No more connection problems outside. So I don't work for Verizon. I work for myself as a contractor. I don't work for unions, you know, all that. So anyway, tell me what you think. Thanks for watching. I hope it wasn't too long, but anyway, it just was a lot to give, but it's a lot of garbage too, and it shouldn't happen. Anyway, thanks again. Bye.